Welcome to the India Development Debate. I'm Tamanna Inamdar and we have an action-packed show for you this evening. But we're going to begin by talking about the nth attempt to privatize Air India. Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Puri today said that the government was determined to privatize the ailing national carrier in the shortest time possible. We'll discuss what the government can do differently this time to move it ahead. But I want to begin today by just giving you a sense of how many times we've tried it. So the Air India privatization story per se starts in about 2001-2002, which is when a government panel began to actually examine a stake sale in Air India. This was the Vajpayee era, and opposition parties were not very happy with the idea. They opposed it tooth and nail. Even then, we learnt much later, a consortium led by Singapore Airlines was almost in the process of finalizing a deal. They backed out at the very last minute because of the attacks on the Colombo airport, which destroyed a number of Singapore Airlines aircrafts, which put them in a very different position, so that deal fell through. Let's cut to 2007 when Air India and Indian Airlines merged. This was a big landmark for the airline. What happened with that is their debt also ballooned. By 2011, in fact, Air India had accumulated debt of over 42,000 crore rupees and needed an almost equivalent amount from the government just to keep running. By 2013, then Civil Aviation Minister Ajit Singh of the RLD pushed once again for privatization, saying it's the only way out. At that time, the opposition parties, BJP and CPIM, primarily opposed the move. Then comes the Modi government in 2014, and in 2017, the government approves the privatization process. So that's the big first move. In 2018, the process begins in earnest, but no bidder comes forward. The government's decision to retain 24% stake and then sell the rest turns out to be a dampener. The government, there were reports, then said, okay, let's sell the whole thing. Now 2019, the same government is back in power. A fresh attempt has begun to divest the government stake in Air India. But the plan is to revive the airline before it's being sold. Remember, currently Air India incurs about 15 crore rupees loss a day. So we'll have to see who comes and buys it. Here's Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Puri today sounding very confident of the prospects of finding a buyer.
I personally believe that government should not be in the business of running airlines. The government's determination to privatize Air India is a given. It's undiluted. It should be a total privatization. We have to get the best possible deal, and we have to get it in the shortest time available. 100% FDI where, I think that is where our thinking caps are on. All I can tell you, there are no holy cows. It's not that some areas are completely closed. All that we will do is we will brainstorm and take those decisions, and we will process them for approval in the best interest of the country.
Okay, so will this time be the magic number of attempts? Will the government finally manage to privatize Air India? Who are the buyers that can come forth? To speak on all of this today, I'm joined now by Jitendra Bhargav, former ED of Air India, and I think one of the closest watchers of what's been happening with the national carrier for a long time now. Rajkamal Rao, MD of Rao Advisors LLC, also joins us on the show. I'm speaking with Dheeraj Mathur, Advisor at Aerospace and Defence, and JB Kadian, General Secretary of ACEU, one of the unions that is opposing the privatization of Air India. Welcome to all of you, and thank you for joining us on the show this evening. Mr. Bhargav, let me begin by asking you what the government now needs to do differently, because the will is there, the ability is there, the mandate is there. Nothing really stopping them.
No, I'll let me put this way to you. Government has been trying, as you very rightly said, for the last 20 years. It was the first company to be referred to the Disinvestment Commission of India in the 1990s. Yeah. Made several attempts, did not succeed. So this is my understanding that the government has learnt its lessons. So they're not going to be putting conditions which are very difficult for a prospective buyer. So if the government really makes it attractive, because Air India has a lot of asset value, something that is ignored, because I have often stated on record that while Air India may not be as good as it should have been, but is also not as bad it is made out to be. So there is a lot of asset value. But the biggest hurdle that government is going to face, because Air India is not like any other PSU. It has an emotional connect. The government will have to...
You know, I'm so sorry, Mr. Bhargav, to cut you in. Does it really still have an emotional connect?
Tamanna, yes.
We are in the middle of a slowdown. Some would argue it's criminal. It's criminal to put more public money into Air India at this point.
Tamanna, nobody else has argued it against it. I've written a full book on it, The Descent of Air India. Let's put it this way. The fact is political spectrum, right, will raise kind of a thing. So there is a need to simply explain to the people as to why are we disinvesting. In my opinion, the biggest selling point is that if you do not disinvest, what does it lead to? Greater marginalization. So if you're going to be a 5, 7, 8% market shareholder, you have lost your total relevance. Today, 1 in 8 passengers is patronizing Air India. All the private carriers put together have placed orders for a huge number of aircraft which are going to be inducted in the next 5 years. Air India simply cannot afford to add capacity of at that pace.
Yeah.
So what will it lead to? The marginalization. So I would like to ask, as a proud Air Indian, are we willing to look our airline become a marginal player in the market?
It already has.
Look, 13% internationally, we are still number 1. Let's put it this way.
Okay.
So it still has value, but I do not want Air India to be a marginal player. So if timely action is taken and Air India brand name is retained, there are certain conditions. And let me explain to you. When I said, how do we ensure success? You see, the employees' unions, for example, have been saying, we have not even been spoken to.
No, we'll come to the employees' union. In fact, I have a representative of the unions on the show, Mr. Kadian, and hum aapke paas bhi aayenge, Kadian ji. But before that, I want to come to Dheeraj Mathur. And ask you, Mr. Mathur, what do you think the government needs to do differently? So clearly, retaining 24% didn't enthuse any prospective buyers, because why do they want the government to be a partner and perhaps tell them what to do and what not to do? Then you currently have a situation where aviation is going through a bad patch. I mean, look at, we're in the context of Jet Airways, pretty much shutting shop. They can't find a buyer. So who's going to buy Air India? Mr. Puri, of course, said I get calls every day from all over the world, but really, are those buyers out there?
Well, yes. I mean, let's. There is a current situation, but there is also a larger perspective. So let's look at the bigger perspective. India's civil aviation story till maybe 7, 8 months back was very, very positive, very strong. None of the fundamentals have changed. We've had a problem with Jet, which was not because the market wasn't there. There were other reasons. Let's not get into that. So the overall Indian civil aviation story is still very strong, very positive. Now, with Jet having been shut down, and we don't know whether and when it will get revived, at this point of time, as such, there is no full service carrier to really compete with Air India. There was Jet, there is Vistara. Vistara is very good but small, and it's not in a, you can't really call it competition for Air India because its coverage and market share, etc., don't match. So as far as Air India is concerned, the overall situation is positive. This is a company that is distressed and in trouble, and therefore there would be buyers, but the government needs to impose as few conditions as possible in the proposed sale. I mean, the last time around, as we all know, the government wanted to have 24% stake. There was no clarity about the employees. There was no, and the entire debt was being passed on to the prospective buyer. These were three big reasons why the last they didn't succeed the last time round.
Okay.
So some of those things have been addressed, and I think the government should, as far as possible, not impose any conditions on the sale, make it a clean sale, give it, allow people, you know, what I heard was that they're planning a 95% disinvestment with 5% to be retained as stock options for the employees, which is fine, that's a fair thing.
Yeah.
We need to keep the employees engaged and motivated. But the government should go in with as few conditions, keep it simple.
Okay, keep it simple, don't keep too many conditions. I want to introduce Mohit Saraf also to the show. Mohit, thank you for joining us. Just your take on what needs to be done differently. Dheeraj has placed in some, parameters that the government can follow. My larger question still remains unanswered. Are the buyers there? Suppose there was a prospective buyer today. They are, in a sense, also looking at an option of Jet Airways in the market. Air India, you're always going to have legacy issues attached. No government, no matter with how strong a mandate, is going to be able to say, okay, you can cull as many employees as you need. You don't need to pay these big salary bills. There's a big fat debt that comes along with it. It's looking like a tricky situation.
I tell you, every deal there is a buyer. So I think let's get that out of our mind, that there will be no buyer of Air India. Jet Airways, there are no buyer because banks and Mr. Goyal wasted way too long time and they killed the airline, and that is what is happening with most deals which are going through IBC, because the courts in India and the banks in India sometimes miss the essence of time. There was a time when Etihad wanted to buy, but the SEBI refused to give an exception on open offer. So there is clear buyer. I think that's not a problem. I think the earlier speaker did mention that you have to make sure that you are attractive, and therefore it has to be unbundled and bundled in such a way that people are interested. I think there will be a lot of interest if the government does it well. If the government doesn't do it well, there will be no interest. And I think it's an important strategic. They need to sit and understand who wants what, and then create competition on that. Legacy issues are all legacy liabilities of the government. They should understand these are liabilities of the government.
Yeah.
Now, some liabilities can be passed on, which can be handled by an acquirer. And if you pass on more liability than what they can handle, they will run away. And I think it's a pure business. Every deal there is a buyer at a price or at a liability, and therefore this is a very interesting deal. Air India, if they package it well, I would say there will be everybody on earth be here who understand aviation business, because the network they have, the slots they have,
yeah,
and they understand that for them, if improving service, improving punctuality, improving airline crews, they can go to places, they can give a very tough competition to Vistara, which is the only full frill airline. So it's a very good airline, but it is between and today the price of oil is reasonable. Today all the routes are full, price of oil is reasonable.
Yeah.
India is about to take off on economic growth.
But no
so
strings
it's
attached.
a right time.
Yeah,
and
but
I think
like
if
you
they
said,
package
Mohit,
it well,
yeah,
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. I'm going to try and fix that feed of Mohit's, but important point there, no strings
attached. Think about it, but just
yeah, I'll come back to you, Mohit. No strings
but
attached.
But not necessarily. I'm not saying remove the strings.
Okay.
Attach the strings. Yeah, but make it intelligent differentiation, what you can sell, what you cannot sell. Okay. Let's assume the government comes up and say, we're going to do right, like the
Okay, Mohit, I need to fix your feed and then come back. So just give me a second. Meanwhile, I want to go to Mr. Kadian. Kadian जी, स्वागत है आपका शो में. बहुत सारी यहाँ बातें हो रही हैं कि एयर इंडिया को बेचा जाना चाहिए. आज मंत्री जी भी कह रहे हैं कि पूरी कोशिश की जाएगी. लेकिन जो एम्प्लॉइज यूनियन है और आप एक एम्प्लॉय यूनियन को हेड करते हैं, आपको इससे दिक्कत है. क्या आप भी नहीं मानते कि अब समय आ गया है एयर इंडिया को बेचने का, कि इस तरह से नहीं चल सकता है?
देखिए, जहाँ तक एयर इंडिया को बेचने की गवर्नमेंट बात कर रही है, मेरा एज ए अपने यूनियन पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से गवर्नमेंट को सोचना चाहिए क्यों एयर इंडिया को क्यों बेचना चाहती है गवर्नमेंट. आज गवर्नमेंट आज जो एयर इंडिया की पोजीशन आई है ये किस वजह से है? क्या गवर्नमेंट ने कभी इस चीज़ को इंक्वायर किया? क्या गवर्नमेंट ने कभी कोई कमेटी बिठाई कि इसको प्रॉब करे कि क्यों एयर इंडिया की ये पोजीशन आई? लास्ट टाइम जो यूपीए गवर्नमेंट थी उस टाइम एयर इंडिया की जो पोजीशन जो है, आज की डेट में भी एयर इंडिया पिछले 3 साल से हम ऑपरेटिंग प्रॉफिट में हैं। हर सेक्टर में एयर इंडिया इम्प्रूवमेंट कर रही है और प्राइवेटाइजेशन ही अगर इसका सोल्यूशन है तो हमारे देश में जितनी भी प्राइवेट एयरलाइंस हैं
तेल के पैसे नहीं दे पा रहे हैं। गवर्नमेंट कंपनियां कह रही हैं कि हम फ्यूल
और
नहीं
सारे
देंगे।
एयरक्राफ्ट हमारे फुल हैं, एयरक्राफ्ट हमारे सारे फुल हैं।
लेकिन 5,000 करोड़ का डेट है,
आप देखिए
तेल के
अगर
पैसे नहीं दे पा
प्राइवेटाइजेशन
रहे
ही इसका सोल्यूशन है तो क्यों नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है। यस, बिल्कुल आप ठीक कह रहे हैं, क्योंकि कंपनी की पोजीशन ऐसी है, हमें इतना इंटरेस्ट पे करना पड़ रहा है कि अगर हमारे पास इंटरेस्ट, हम जो है ना, हम गवर्नमेंट को क्या रिक्वेस्ट कर रहे हैं कि हमारा इंटरेस्ट है 50% रिड्यूस कर दो, सो दैट कि हम जो है अपने खर्चे अपने आप निकाल सकें। लेकिन गवर्नमेंट ना एटीएफ के प्राइसेस में कभी कोई कंसेशन देती है, ना हमारी जो है इसमें इंटरेस्ट रेट में गवर्नमेंट हेल्प कर रही है। आप देखिए फिर भी एयर इंडिया हर सेक्टर में हम इम्प्रूवमेंट कर रहे हैं। एज ए यूनियन हम सब लोग एयर इंडिया के अंदर यूनाइटेड हैं और हमारी रिक्वेस्ट है गवर्नमेंट से भी कि एयर इंडिया को प्राइवेटाइज ना करके एयर इंडिया को सोल्यूशन करना चाहिए और उसमें एयर इंडिया एम्प्लॉइज बढ़ चढ़ के हम आगे सपोर्ट करेंगे, जिससे कि एयर इंडिया को एक नेशनल कैरियर है। एयर इंडिया खाली एयरलाइंस नहीं है, वी आर ऑल्सो द सेकेंड लाइन ऑफ डिफेंस इन द कंट्री। नेशनल लेवल के लिए, अपने देश के लिए भी एयर इंडिया की रिक्वायरमेंट है, जो कि हमारे देश में एक नेशनल कैरियर होना चाहिए।
Okay, that's an important perspective, and I'm going to take that forward. But before that, I just want to, and before I get responses from the panelists to what Mr. Kadian has just said, something interesting that Subramaniam Swamy, BJP leader, tweeted out a short while ago, saying the Civil Aviation Minister Hardeep Puri has been misled by foreign consultancy firms and corrupt bureaucrats on privatizing Air India. I need to remove his doubts, because if government goes ahead with selling off Air India, it will be playing into the hands of foreign interests. This is very interesting, because this is also the position of the RSS, that Air India can be sold but not to a foreign player. I want to come to Raj Kamal Rao. It's very easy to say on the face of it, this airline is bleeding, the exchequer should not be putting in more money, but there are a lot of various facets. If we cut out for any reason a foreign player from the mix of potential buyers, is there then any clear buyer in sight, or does this narrow the pool further?
Hi, thank you for bringing me on. We seem to be injecting a lot of emotions into a business decision.
Yes.
So that is, I think, the root cause of the problem. So I'm very glad that Mr. Puri made the point that his decision to privatize Air India is final. But we have to come back and see whether his rhetoric actually matches the action. In 2019, there is absolutely no reason for a country of our size to have the pride to say we have a flagship carrier that is owned by the government. We should not be in this business at all. Aviation is not a business that the government of India needs to be in. So it has to get out. Now, the question that has been discussed already is, the point is that we have a really bad product to sell. So the government really doesn't have, have a lot of, they have no business to attach conditions, because the assets that was talked about before, the assets are really all around all around the network. But what else does Air India have other than the network, other than the market share? It really doesn't have anything. It is bleeding, as you said, 15 crore rupees a day. And it has a debt of 50,000 crores. It also has a very strong union.
Yeah.
So for any potential buyer coming into the Indian aviation market, those are red flags, and they will scare any potential buyer away. We need to make the deal in such a way that it is attractive for somebody to buy. I completely agree with what one of the guests said, that there is always a price at which every deal can be made. The question is, what is that price? And therefore, we should be open at this point. We should
Yeah.
be open. We should be open to even selling the airline in bits and pieces, because what the taxpayers of India cannot afford
Yeah.
is to pay 15 crore rupees to an ailing airline every day. The same money can be used for something else.
Yeah, I know. The unfortunate situation right now is that it's not just the aviation sector or Air India that is ailing. A lot of sectors are ailing. So you need money to go around. Okay, I want to open up the debate, and anyone who has a response, please indicate. I'll come to you. Too much emotion. Mr. Bhargav, let me come to you. Too much emotion. It has to be called Air India. It is the national carrier. It is the pride, etc. It's a business at the end of the day. The government has no business being in business. That's a stated position.
Yeah, let me put it in perspective first. You see, a person who has worked for Air India will have a different perspective than anybody else. Let me put it this thing. When I was writing my book, I made a very clear thing in the book that for employees like Mr. Kadian's union to understand that Air India needs to be disinvested, I said, let's Air India produce two balance sheets. One as a government entity, because there's a lot of cost on Air India which get reflected because of government ownership.
Yeah.
And then as a second is a balance sheet which is done as other private airlines are making. And then put it across to the unions and say, look, this is the actual performance. Because as you very rightly said, bulk of the question that people have been asking, merger was a wrong decision. Ordering aircraft in numbers which were far more than what airline could afford, again fully deploy, also landed the airline with a lot of debt. Now, once you have a debt and then a series of problems come in, you start compromising on the product and all those kind of a thing, it leads to a series of things.
Yeah.
So this is where I said, communication exercise will have to precede government decisions so that everybody is on board.
But that's not the question on the table right now. The question on the table is, this is a business, look at it like a business. It is a business at the end of the day.
Nobody will dispute it. But question comes in, let's have a happy situation that everybody is on board. And as I said earlier, there is very pressing urgency for disinvesting Air India. We know it, as I said, it is not the question of government infusing money periodically. It's a threat of marginalization as you go along, which will ruin Air India, and that is what people need to look at.
Okay, but is that the real concern? Dheeraj Mathur, I want you to come in on some of the points that have been debated so far. Yes, Mr. Mathur.
Yeah, so I completely agree that this is, at the end of the day, a business, a commercial decision.
Yeah.
And we need to take the emotion out of it. We need to take the national pride out of it, because there's just too much money involved. You know, we can't afford to just for the sake of tokenism to put in so much taxpayers' money. Now, see, the fundamental point is that a lot of the problems of Air India come because it's owned by the government. And I say this in without any kind of bias or prejudice, because you see, government ownership means that the corporate governance structure of the government will be applied to any company that it owns. Now, if this was a promoter-owned company, whatever corporate governance structure that the promoter chose to put in place would be applied. Now, as far as the government is concerned, we have a constitution. There are certain procedures and things that are laid down vis-a-vis government-owned companies. You need a CAG audit, you need L1 bidding, this and so on. Now, in an airlines business, as the Honorable Minister very rightly said, government has no business to be in this in this business, simply because the kind of agility, the kind of quick decision making that is needed in a services industry, and that too one like the airlines, is just not possible given the government process. Second, a lot of decision making in the government is influenced by political stroke, social stroke, equity considerations.
Yeah.
Now, when you're in a business, you only need to look at commercial, parameters, because you know, if it's a private company, you don't have the luxury of getting bailouts from the government. So it's literally you basically eat what you kill, as it were. So the decision making in a commercial organization has to follow strictly commercial business considerations, not the other considerations
Yes.
that the government has to take into account when it takes any decision.
But
So
there
that's why-
are
that's one very
examples. There
important
are
reason
examples,
why,
on the
like
other
I said,
hand,
we
of
need to take the
well-run
emotion out. We
government-owned
need to take
airlines
the
around the
tokenism
world.
out.
Yeah.
Just one point
Yeah, yeah.
here,
Tamanna.
which means number one, even when JRD Tata, right, and Air India was known as a great airline in the 60s and the 70s, it was government owned. Let's not forget number one. Number two, while the debt figure and the loss figure is in public domain and being put repeatedly in public domain and everybody knows it, nobody is talking about the assets that Air India has. And that is what distinguishes Air India with the other airlines.
No, the assets are there, but no one wants the rest of the stuff that comes with it.
But, Tamanna, we need to put it in public domain. How were these assets created? Air India had an equity of only 153 crores put in the 1950s. How did the Air India building come about? How was the engineering setup created, etc.? So Air India was a government-owned airline, and Air India was flourishing. I agree with you. The competition was not as intense as it is today.
Not at
The
all.
changes
Yeah.
have to be brought in.
Yeah.
That is why I said keeping all factors in view, disinvestment is essential, but the way to go about will be to get stakeholders on board by making them
Revive and
understand
sell.
as to why do we
I
need
want
to
to bring in
disinvest.
a different perspective. Revive and sell, or sell as of now to whoever you can in whichever parts you can. I want to get Mr. Kadian's voice in. Kadian ji, जो सब कह रहे हैं उस पर आपका रिएक्शन चाह रही थी मैं. Kadian ji, can you hear me? हाँ, जो सब कह रहे हैं उस पर मैं आपका रिएक्शन चाह रही थी. जो कह रहे हैं कि इस पर इमोशनल मत होइए. ये एक बिजनेस है जो नहीं चल रहा है. नहीं चल रहा है तो उसको बेचना पड़ेगा, इसका कुछ करना पड़ेगा. इस पर भावुक मत होइए कि नेशनल कैरियर है या हमारी इससे जो भावनाएं जुड़ी हुई हैं. बिजनेस है, नहीं चल रहा है, बेचना पड़ेगा.
नहीं, ऐसा नहीं है. आप देखिए, गवर्नमेंट को सोचना चाहिए कि एयर इंडिया की जो पोजीशन आई है ये क्यों आई है, कि ये जो पोजीशन एयर इंडिया की आई है ये कैसे आई है, क्यों आई है. क्योंकि इसके अंदर कुछ ऐसे डिसीजंस हुए हैं जो कि एयर इंडिया की आज ये जो पोजीशन आई है इसमें कुछ ऐसे डिसीजंस हुए हैं जो कि उसकी वजह से एयर इंडिया की ये पोजीशन आई है. अदरवाइज ऐसा नहीं है कि एयर इंडिया जो है ना, अगर एयर इंडिया को आज भी जो भी डिसीजंस आप देखिए, जो भी मैनेजमेंट के डिसीजन है, एयरलाइंस के डिसीजंस हैं, वो डिसीजन एयरलाइन में होते नहीं है, डिसीजन बाहर से होते हैं. तो एयरलाइंस कैसे चलेगी जो है ना. अगर डिसीजन जो है ना हमारी एयरलाइंस में होने लगेंगे तो एयरलाइंस से चल सकती है. एम्प्लॉइज उसके लिए कॉपरेट करने के लिए तैयार हैं. आप देखिए 2007 से एम्प्लॉइज की सैलरी रिवाइज नहीं हुई है.
हाँ,
2007
तो प्राइवेट प्लेयर आएगा तो
उसके बाद
चीजें बेहतर
एम्प्लॉइज
भी
की
हो
सैलरी
सकती है.
रिवाइज नहीं हुई है.
कादियान जी,
एम्प्लॉइज फिर
प्राइवेट
भी
प्लेयर
कॉपरेट कर रहे हैं.
नहीं, प्राइवेट प्लेयर आएगा तो चीजें बेहतर हो सकती
जी.
हैं. प्राइवेट प्लेयर आएगा, कोई और खरीदेगा तो चीजें बेहतर भी हो सकती हैं.
प्राइवेट प्लेयर देखो, इंडिया के अंदर प्राइवेट एयरलाइंस के क्या हाल होती जा रही है. एक के बाद एक एयरलाइंस डूबती जा रही है. प्राइवेट एयरलाइंस, अभी आपने देखा जेट एयरवेज का क्या हुआ. दूसरी एयरलाइंस हमारी कंट्री में जब से प्राइवेट एयरलाइंस आई हैं तब से कितनी प्राइवेट एयरलाइंस जो है ना चली गई अपना पूरा दुकान बंद करके. लेकिन एयर इंडिया अभी भी जो है ना, एयर इंडिया अभी तक चल रही है क्योंकि एयर इंडिया गवर्नमेंट की कंपनी थी. हाँ ठीक है, इसके अंदर कुछ ऐसे पहले जो डिसीजन हुए हैं उसकी वजह से एयर इंडिया की ये पोजीशन आई है. अगर आज, हाँ जी,
टैक्स का पैसा उसको चला रहा है.
नहीं, ऐसा नहीं कह सकते आप. जो है ना, एक तो मार्केट के अंदर बिल्कुल इंफॉर्मेशन गलत दे के एयर इंडिया की इमेज खराब की जा रही है. ऐसा नहीं है. एयर इंडिया ने कभी भी, जब से 1953 में एयर इंडिया को इंडियन एयरलाइंस और एयर इंडियन एयरलाइंस का पहले मार्केट के अंदर नाम को किया कि इंडियन एयरलाइंस का नाम मैप से आउट कर दो.
हाँ.
दोनों एयरलाइंस को मर्ज किया. दैट वाज ए रॉन्ग डिसीजन. उसी की वजह से एयर इंडिया की ये पोजीशन हुई है. अगर मर्जर नहीं होता तो आज एयरलाइंस हमारी चल रही होती.
Okay, I want to come back to Rajkumar Rao.
क्योंकि मर्जर से
Yes,
क्या हुआ
Rajkumar Rao, I want to come
कि
back to
दोनों
you.
एयरलाइंस को,
The fact is, you say don't be emotional. People are going to be emotional in droves. If there is a foreign player who comes and evinces interest, it's going to become much more complicated than we are seeing right now. And if you cut out a foreign buyer for whatever reason, then your pool really narrows down.
So Tamanna, here is an interesting point, right? When somebody joined Air India in the early 90s, when Air India was first slotted for, for disinvestment, that person may have had a 27-year career with Air India and may have retired last year, and still we are talking about disinvestment. So that is how long things happen when a government owns an airline. So the thing is, we should not be emotionally involved. This has to be a commercial decision 100%. And I completely disagree with Subramaniam Swamy. What difference does it make if foreign investors come in? This is not a national security issue. It's not like you're selling HAL or something that makes military aircraft. It is a commercial airline. You cannot have it both ways. On the one side, we say it's a commercial airline with full service airline flying to 90 destinations all around the world, and then you cannot turn around and somehow say, how is a green dollar that comes in from a foreign investor any different from a green dollar that comes from an Indian? These are the kinds of absolutely silly restrictions that are going to throw a wrench in the wheel, and that is the reason we have not been able to disinvest for 30 years.
Do you see that changing now? Do you see the situation change now? Because the statements sound good, but the fact is that a lot of people share the view of what Mr. Kadian is saying today on the panel.
So if there is one thing that we have learned from the NDA government going back to 2014, and that is that actions don't always match the rhetoric. I mean, the GST tax was sold as a simple tax. We know that it is anything but simple, right? So the thing is, I completely applaud Mr. Puri for coming out and saying that he doesn't believe that the government should be in the aviation business. I just hope that his actions meet that rhetoric. So I'm very hopeful. I'm very hopeful because of what he said.
Yeah.
But let us see how, the devil is in the details.
Okay. I'm going to ask that same question to Mr. Mathur. I'm really out of time, so I request brief answers because I want to come to the others as well. Mr. Mathur, are you hopeful of something different happening this time round and no more spokes in the wheel, that not this kind of a buyer, these conditions for unions, etc.?
Yeah, as I said, if we keep it simple, minimize the number of conditions that we impose on the sale, then I think we should find a buyer because, number one, Air India, as everyone accepts, is a great asset.
Yeah.
Number two, at this point of time, there is no competition for Air India, no real competition for Air India. So just for these two reasons, plus the fact that, as I said, the Indian growth story is very positive as far as the economy is concerned and as far as this sector is concerned. So there may have been blips in the last 1 year or so, but overall, both the economy and the sector, we have a strong, stable government. Everything is positive in the medium to long term. So I think there should be no problems in selling the airlines.
Yeah, this could be the golden moment. Mr. Bhargav, you think it will happen?
Well, I'm very hopeful this time because, as I said, if you can't do it this time,
then when can
and
you?
when it gets further marginalized, the chances of any buyer coming and showing interest in Air India would be reduced that much further.
Any concerns about political pressures as far as unions are concerned in terms of if the buyer is foreign or domestic?
As one is the public perception that Air India employees, what do you do with them?
Yeah.
So I would like, basically, because it's a non-pensionable job in Air India, unlike many of the other PSUs, is to look at what are you going to do, what do you get, is the medical. Now, government has to be very clear that we have got an example of Balco, Hindustan Zinc. What did we do with that? Now, why can't the management share this with the unions? It's very surprising that the management has not so far, in spite of this repeated attempts on disinvestment, shared with the unions as to how are they going to be taken care of.
All right, I'm sure they will. They'll have to bring them on board and, the time is ripe. If not now, then when? Let not the moment pass. From October, I believe, the whole process will start. Hopefully, things will pick up on the economic front as well and there will be more buyers on the anvil and the government will be able to sweeten the deal, not repeat mistakes of the past. Thank you to all of you for joining us on Debate 1 on the India Development Debate. We're taking a very short break. A lot of exciting stuff up next. The RBI annual report is out today. Why should you care? Well, first, because it tells you to some extent how they got all that extra money to give to the government of India and also tells you about how much currency is now in circulation. Next, We're talking about how to maintain fitness. Remember, the Prime Minister today has called for a fitness movement across the country. But what do you do when you're stuck behind a desk all day? I've got Mickey Mehta giving us a few tips. Don't miss it. Coming right back.